So it was November, first interview after you won the election. We were about a football field that way. I asked you what your biggest priority was, and you pointed behind you and said, that pile of rubble. That pile of rubble's gone. A lot of these communities are better off than they were in November, but there's still clearly a lot of work to do.
Ton of work to do.
Are you, I don't know, surprised, happy to see the magnitude of work that's been done over the last year?
I'm really proud of all the work that has been done, but I am an impatient person, and I know that when it's my city, if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking it's not being done fast enough. If it's my house that hasn't been rebuilt, I'm desperate for it to be rebuilt. If it's my business that is struggling to have people walk in the door, I want them there tomorrow. So there's this tension where we know that we need to go fast. People deserve for us to go fast, but a recovery, unfortunately, isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. When you have as widespread damage as we've had here in Western North Carolina, this is going to be a multi-year process. But what we have to do is make sure that every month, every 6 months, every year, we are getting as much done in that period of time as we possibly can.
So you travel around the region quite a bit.
Yep.
When you're going to these different communities, what are you seeing when you're talking to people? What are they saying now that may be different than what they said to you in November or December?
I think back then, a year ago, it was so fresh. People were really processing their emotions. The loss, whether it was loss of people or the loss of what they had poured their entire life savings in, the loss of the roof over their head. So there was a lot of painful emotions. What I go now is just incredible optimism, and really it's inspiring because they have been working nonstop, absolutely exhausting pace to get the muck out, to take the sheetrock off the wall, to strip it to the studs, to put in a new floor, to put in a new HVAC, to put in entirely new electrical. And they've been doing this for months and months and months, and they've gotten it done for the most part. There are obviously still a lot of places that still need to be finished, but they're ready to go. And to see that level of urgency that exists out there makes me want, and my team want, to meet that same level.
So $13.5 billion is the new ask, the updated ask.
Yep.
Only 9% of the storm's impact cost-wise is what the federal government has
committed so far. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
You said recovery needs to be a team sport.
Yep.
But so people understand, in that team sport analogy, the federal government needs to be Michael Jordan on the team.
They're
right?
the check writer. They're the check writer. Think about the scale of this damage, $60 billion. That is more than money exists in this region as an entirety. The state budget is about $34 billion a year. So essentially you're talking about 2 years of the entirety of the state budget just to come back to where we were before. That's why we have the federal government. They are the big brother. They've got a huge checkbook. And honestly, they are that insurer of last resort, and they have been that historically for every state that's taken it on the chin. And you asked me an interesting question about, well, we're at 9% now, and yes, Sandy ended up being at 78%, but where was New Jersey and New York after 1 year? And we went back and did a little research, and they were at 50% after 1 year. The federal government had said, we will appropriate you half of the overall damages, and then it ended up getting to 78%. I'm just wanting to see the same level of urgency from the federal government as we're seeing from the state, as most importantly as what we are seeing from the people of Western North Carolina.
This is a federal government that promised not to forget this region, but 9% versus 50% is a staggering difference.
We want them to do more.
So part of that is the $8 billion request for HUD.
Yep.
Some of it will go to rebuilding houses, others rebuilding small businesses.
Yep, and infrastructure too. It's really flexible money that can help us be creative and meet the needs.
So a lot of this talk with problems has been the speed at which things are happening. You look at organizations, nonprofits like Baptists on Mission or Samaritan's Purse, they've built houses by the hundreds.
Yep.
Through the HUD program, we've had some more difficulties about being slow. Are these concerns that you guys are raising?
So yes, federal government has a big bureaucracy, and we know that, which is why, incidentally, we as a state did some grants early on to Baptists on Mission and Habitat for Humanity. And Baptists on Mission just announced they've done about 500 houses with the $3 million grant that we awarded them. We have pushed as fast as any state after Helene, faster than any state after Helene, and faster than any state after a major hurricane in over a decade. So we're working as fast as we can to move the federal government to where we are. We just did the first house using that HUD money. 11 months, it's actually incredibly fast. It doesn't sound it because you're like, 11 months, what took so long? I cannot tell you the levels of bureaucracy and application we had to go through. So we've just got to keep accelerating, understanding that this is not a sprint, that we're going to be working on houses for a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years. This is going to take a long while, but we've got 20 builders already approved, ready to get to work. We have a housing supervisor. We've got a program that we think is going to work, and we can't wait for it to get unleashed.
So President Trump named you to the governor's committee?
Yeah, the governor's advisory council.
Yeah. So I know you had spoken about speaking with Governor Landry in Louisiana about some FEMA reforms.
Yep.
How's that going?
Well, the president has a FEMA advisory council, and they are considering a whole series of reforms. I wrote a letter to them detailing my suggestions. Basically, FEMA can be better at what it does. Every institution can be better, but FEMA helps us respond to natural disaster. If we lost FEMA, that would be a man-made disaster, because we need a coordinated entity in the federal government to help us deal and respond to storms. They can be better. We can have a single point of application through FEMA, so you don't have to do one to FEMA and then one to the Small Business Administration, one to the USDA. Let's have one application. Let's have FEMA give money to the state when we have a pre-approved plan, so that instead of we're working from a reimbursement model, give us what we know is at least a chunk of what we're going to spend, so that we can get the money out into the communities right away, and we're not asking local governments to get into debt in order to respond to the crisis. There are other things that FEMA can do to be better at what it does, but we still need FEMA.
So there was talks of cutting FEMA altogether.
Yeah, that would have been a disaster.
But there were the whole point was to get money to communities faster, and in reality, especially defend the spend, Secretary Noem having to put eyes on anything over $100,000, the process, you tell me, has it gotten slower?
It's more bureaucratic. I mean, it's kind of ironic, because I've heard the president speak about this. This is not what the president wants. But what has happened is, it used to be FEMA would review your expenses, and if it met the approval that they granted you earlier, they would then reimburse you for it. Now, it's no longer enough to show FEMA that you did what you said you were going to do, and you did it in a fiscally responsible way. FEMA then approves it. You don't get the check. It then goes to the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. She reviews everything over $100,000, and frankly, that's most of the bills. She then has to review it, which can add weeks or months to the process. Then the money gets transferred to the state, but we can't draw it down and give it to the local governments. It then goes to DOJ, to a defend the spend, where they look at exactly the same stuff that FEMA did months earlier. That takes another 30 to 90 days. So we have 3 levels of bureaucracy when we used to have just one.
And this is something that's frustrating for not just Democrats, but Republicans too.
Yeah, most of the county commissions in the western part of the state have majority Republican commissioners, because it's a Republican part of North Carolina. It's their budgets that are suffering from lack of reimbursement by the federal government.
Talk to me about these cash flow issues that counties and towns are having now.
Well, counties have outlaid vast sums of money. It could be a couple $1 million on a project, whether it was debris removal or having to fix their water and sewer system. They don't have just millions, tens of millions sitting in an account that they can use and then replenish. That money is what they would then be using to pay the salaries for the local police or the firefighters or the Parks and Rec department. So they need to get reimbursed quickly so they can meet all of their obligations that they have just to serve the people as a city normally does.
One of the other big tenets of this request is $2 billion from the USDOT. Mm-hmm. We were just up in Yancey County the other day, right where Sheriff Hilliard's parents' house floated away. that bridge is still out there,
Yeah,
and work
yeah.
hasn't even begun. So
Yep.
there's I think 3% you said of projects still remain.
Actually, 97% of roads have reopened,
Okay.
but because it's reopened doesn't mean it's fixed properly. It means that traffic can flow. Like, look at I-40. It's reopened, but it's only 2 lanes, not 4. So we have billions of dollars of more transportation infrastructure work like that bridge that we have to do, and that is going to take a few years for sure.
So we're at this point, most of what we're talking about is not getting temporary access. It is restoring proper permanent access.
Exactly.
Okay. The other thing I needed to ask you about was, I guess an honest question. We've just been going through all these fundings the last couple of weeks. Does it ever get confusing for you, all the different avenues and streams which this funding is coming down from?
It's insanely complicated. And yes, it gets complicated for me. It gets complicated for my staff when sometimes I'll ask a question and they say, well, let me go back and make sure, because there's this stream, which is different from this stream. There's this approval, which is different from that approval. So this is intensely complicated. In some ways it has to be, because when you're dealing with this much money, you want to make sure that there's accountability. There are different agencies that have different responsibilities and obligations, but it is a very complicated process, and I'm sure it can be made better.
This is part of the reason Grow and See was created, though, right? So however many months later, what's the progress report on Grow and See?
It's been a success. Every day I have a senior staff meeting to start the day. Every one of those meetings is started with a report from Matt Calabria, the head of Grow and See. By the way, every cabinet meeting, which I have every week or two, starts with every department talking about what they've done as it relates to Hurricane Helene. It's that urgent an obligation for all of us. And so what Grow and See has been able to do, it's called the Governor's Recovery Office for Western North Carolina, is by having that in my office, it means they deal with DOT on roads. They deal with Department of Public Safety on emergency management and private roads and bridges. They deal with the Department of Commerce on Renew NC, the housing program. I want to make sure that we have one entity close to me that is aware of everything, all the moving pieces, to make sure that each piece is moving at the maximum speed.
You recently had a phone call with the president. How did that go? How long was it? Tell us what you can.
It was a couple minutes and it went well. He was calling to share good news that I had, this is in Helene, there was Tropical Storm Chantal in the middle part of the state. It was really impactful. It was about a 7-county area. 6 North Carolinians lost their lives in that storm, and it created tens of millions of dollars of damage to public infrastructure. So I asked for a declaration which would trigger 75% of the funds would be reimbursed to local government. The state needs to come up with 25%. And he was calling to share the good news that he had granted that request. So I was very grateful. And then, of course, we talked about Helene, because the time I had met him was here at the Asheville airport in January, first trip he did after his inauguration. And I told him that things are making progress. I said the debris removal is happening. 14 million cubic yards is a lot of debris. That does not mean there's still not debris out there, but most of it at this point is private property owners who need to figure out what they're doing with their own property. But I said, thank you for the attention you brought to debris removal. I said, but we need a lot more federal help. I said, I'm going to be making an additional appropriation request of $12 or $13 billion. And that I was coming up to DC. I'm going to go tomorrow. And asked to meet with his OMB director, who happened to walk into the office. I didn't see this because we were on the phone, but he said, oh, Russell Vogt just walked in the office. I said, great, because I'm trying to get a meeting with him, so hopefully that will happen.
This is a recent request. A spokesperson for the White House said that request made you unfit to run a state, but it sounds like he was a little more open to it this time.
I will take the statement from the White House press person with a bit of a grain of salt. It was a press person, it wasn't the president, and my job as governor is really basic. It's to fight for the people of North Carolina. And if they're going to criticize me because I'm asking for more federal resources that we deserve our fair share. In fact, I would be unfit if I did not fight for North Carolina.
This is not just a federal issue. The state has put in some money themselves.
Yep.
Is the legislature, in your conversations with Speaker Hall or Leader Berger, Is there thought to an additional appropriation?
I think there will be additional appropriations. I don't know when the third one of my administration will come, but we've had very collaborative relations between the administration, my administration, and the legislature. We update them regularly on what our priorities are, what our status is, and it's been the way it should be. You know, they ask us tough questions to make sure that we are doing the programs the way they want us to, that they wanted them to, and we're making clear to them of what our future financial needs will be. I think that there'll be more money coming down the road.
This is a hyper-specific question. We're in the River Arts District, which is a hub in Asheville, but there's a lot of this storm was felt in our smaller towns. Spruce Pine in Mitchell County has been without one of their 2 grocery stores since the storm, and that grocer has not committed yet to coming back. So they're still technically a food desert. Those are issues maybe you don't think about right away. You think about businesses and roads and bridges, but that's an entire county that's technically a food desert.
Yeah,
how do you maybe lean on the private sector to say, hey, we've got this issue here?
Well, I think one thing the state can do is make sure that small businesses that are struggling have financial support to get them through to the other side. I've asked the legislature, that's one area where we've had some differences. I believe the state can have some forgivable loans made to small businesses that need it to deal with whatever demolition they need to do, or whatever reconstruction they need to do, or whatever lost inventory they had. And so I'm going to keep pushing the legislature. That's part of that CDBG-DR appropriation I'm making to the federal government, is help us help small business, private sector, because they play a critical role in making sure that our communities have the resources that all communities need in order to thrive.
Do you have a gut feeling about this request?
I don't. I mean, I'm hopeful just because it's so clear that it's needed, and I've had encouragement from our congressional delegation, Senators Tillis and Budd. They have been very supportive of our request to date. Representative Edwards and the rest of the delegation, they've been supportive. You know, we're going to talk tomorrow and strategize about what we have to do to go forward together to get Congress to step up for Western North Carolina.
What have you learned about the state that you've represented in some capacity over the last 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
What have you learned this year that's different than maybe the last 19?
The grit and determination of people. When you're out there and you meet Amy Rubin, who's got Big Pillow Brewing in Hot Springs, or Shelby Trammell, who's got a general store in Lansing, or Matt and Michelle Bands, who have a restaurant in Chimney Rock, or Josh Copas, who's got this cool jail in Marshall. And you talk to them and you learn how hard, how unrelenting they have worked in order to reopen their business. You're fired up because you're so impressed by what they're bringing to this effort. It makes you, as the state, want to meet their same level of urgency. You want to deliver with the same speed and commitment and dedication that they have. And so I've just been overwhelmed by the people of Western North Carolina.
Is it a feeling where you're you said speed. I imagine you're sprinting every day, but it's not 100-meter. You have to sprint a marathon, several marathons.
That's right.
Is that what it feels like?
It does, but there's always something we can do today that will move us closer to our end goal of recovery. So it's what can we do today? What is right in front of us? What needs to happen for the next thing to happen? And that's what I'm constantly pushing my team, my staff. It's like, well, what do we have to do to get here? Okay, well then when are we going to do this? Then let's get that done so we can do that, because that will then lead to the next positive outcome. You just have to be asking yourself every day, what can I do today to advance the ball?
Governor, thanks so much for joining us.
Justin, thanks.
Appreciate it.